The number one question I get every single day is this. If XRP is truly the most strategically positioned digital asset in the world, why does every comment section, every Twitter thread, every dinner table conversation still call it a scam? And here is what I'm about to tell you that is not being explained to retail investors the way that it should be. The accusation itself, the word scam, repeated thousands of times a day across the internet, is not a verdict on XRP. It is a confession. A confession from the people saying it about how they evaluate assets, how they measure time, and what frameworks they have never bothered to update. While everyone was staring at the price chart, waiting for a candle to validate their patience, something massive has been happening underneath this asset. And the world missed the signal because the world was looking at the wrong screen. Let me pull back the curtain. Welcome back. I am the calm analyst. Today, we decode why the XRP is a scam narrative is the single most reliable indicator that the repricing has not yet happened, and why that is mathematically, historically, and structurally a feature, not a bug. Before we go under the surface, none of this is financial advice. This is educational analysis grounded in on-chain data, institutional filings, and 4 decades of documented infrastructure cycles. In this briefing, we examine what the criticism actually exposes, what the silent build looks like in real time, and how to recognize the pattern before it closes. Let's jump in. Let's start with the hard truth. Roughly 95% of people calling XRP a scam are staring at one variable, the price candle. They are not looking at the architecture. They are not looking at the regulatory milestones that have cleared one after another over the past 24 months. They are not looking at the corporate treasury filings. They are not looking at the central bank pilots. They are looking at one number. And when that number does not move on their preferred timeline, they reach a verdict. That is not analysis. That is reaction. And reaction is the cheapest currency in financial markets, because anyone can produce it. Here is what their criticism actually reveals. 4 things, and you need to see all of them clearly. First, it reveals a framework problem. They are using a retail measurement tool to evaluate an institutional construction project. Retail measures in weeks. Institutions measure in decades. The infrastructure that becomes systemically valuable in 2030 was poured in concrete in 2024, 2025, and 2026. Anyone judging XRP on a 1-year chart is using a yardstick that cannot measure what is actually being built. Second, it reveals a knowledge gap. They have never bothered to understand what XRP was engineered to do. They do not know about correspondent banking, the slow, expensive, multi-day mesh of intermediary banks that handles every international payment in the world. They do not know about the $27 trillion locked inside Nostro Vostro accounts at any given moment, sitting idle, earning nothing, hedging currency risk that should not exist in 2026. They do not know about the bridge liquidity problem that XRP was specifically designed to dissolve. They are evaluating a solution without understanding the problem. Third, they confuse silence with absence. Because XRP is not screamed about on CNBC every morning, they assume nothing is happening. But this is where the retail investor and the institutional investor live on entirely different planets. Institutions never shout. The biggest moves in finance happen in compliance committees, in custody onboarding documents, in regulatory filings, in NDAs that get signed in glass conference rooms 18 months before any announcement reaches the public. The silence is the signal. It is not the absence of one. And fourth, the deepest reveal of all. They do not understand how infrastructure repricing works. And this is the mechanism almost nobody is explaining to you correctly. So let me do it now. Markets systematically undervalue infrastructure assets right up until the moment those assets become systemically important. This is not opinion. This is documented financial history. And the reason it happens every single time is because infrastructure does not announce itself. It accumulates. It integrates. It becomes load-bearing. And then one day the market wakes up and realizes the price was wrong for the entire build phase. Retail does not see infrastructure cycles. Retail only sees the repricing. And by the time the repricing is visible, the entry window is already closed. Let's do the math that the retail crowd ignores. Cross-border payments move roughly $150 trillion every single year. The foreign exchange market clears $7.5 trillion every single day. The global derivatives market sits at around 1.2 quadrillion in notional value. And underneath all of this, the tokenization wave that BlackRock, Fidelity, and Franklin Templeton are publicly building toward is targeting an estimated $4 trillion in real-world assets migrating onto blockchain rails inside this decade. Now here is the supply side. XRP has a fixed cap of 100 billion tokens. Circulating supply sits at roughly 56 billion. Escrow releases 1 billion per month, and the vast majority gets relocked. Exchange reserves are sitting at multi-year lows as tokens move steadily into institutional custody. Once a token enters a multi-signature institutional vault, it does not come back to market for a 10% profit. It is gone. Think about that math. If XRP captures even 0.5% of the cross-border settlement flow it was engineered for, we are talking about roughly $750 billion in annual volume routing through a supply that is shrinking, not growing. And here is the part that breaks people's brains. The higher the price of XRP goes, the fewer tokens are required to settle a given transfer. To move 10 million at $2 per token requires 5 million XRP. At $100 per token, that same transfer requires only 100,000. Higher price is not the obstacle to institutional adoption. Higher price is the requirement for institutional efficiency. Less slippage, less liquidity drag, cleaner settlement. This isn't a prediction. It is a design requirement. If you have a problem with these numbers, you do not have a problem with me. You have a problem with the laws of arithmetic and the architecture of global finance. While retail investors are panic selling and posting XRP is a scam in comment sections, the institutional signal has never been stronger. Look at the evidence already on the public record. Ripple acquired Hidden Road, a multi-billion-dollar prime brokerage. That is not a marketing move. That is a firm buying its way directly into the plumbing of institutional credit and clearing. They acquired G Treasury, integrating XRP native rails into corporate treasury management for thousands of enterprises. JP Morgan has settled treasury instruments on Ledger infrastructure. Goldman Sachs has disclosed exposure to XRP investment vehicles. Spot XRP ETF flows have stacked consecutive positive days, with institutional allocators quietly building positions, while retail debates whether the asset is real. Larry Fink at BlackRock has spent 2 years preparing the market for the tokenization of every asset. Jerome Powell has explicitly named stablecoins and tokenized settlement as part of the future Fed framework. The Japanese FSA has cleared the regulatory pathway for XRP-denominated products. The Digital Asset Clarity Act in the United States has removed the final overhang that kept Tier 1 banks on the sidelines. Ask yourself this brutal question. Does a multi-trillion-dollar asset manager move without absolute legal certainty? Does a global prime broker get acquired for retail sentiment? Does a sovereign regulator clear a framework for an asset that institutions do not intend to use? Absolutely not. These entities do not gamble. They position. The contrast is the entire story. Retail behavior, complaining, refreshing the chart, posting accusations, exiting positions out of impatience. Institutional behavior, signing NDAs, accumulating in OTC blocks, building custody infrastructure, filing regulatory paperwork, and waiting. This is not retail FOMO. This is calculated positioning by custodians who already know what is coming, because they are the ones building it. So when does the framework gap close? When does the silent build become the loud repricing? The catalysts are no longer theoretical. They are scheduled. The Digital Asset Clarity Act has removed the regulatory risk premium that suppressed institutional allocation for years. With that overhang gone, every compliance officer who said, "We cannot touch this until clarity arrives," has lost their last excuse. spot XRP ETF products are now actively accumulating flow. Each consecutive day of positive inflows pulls additional tokens out of float and into long-term custody structures that do not sell on a 10% candle. The tokenization of real-world assets, projected to reach trillions in notional value this decade, requires settlement infrastructure that exists in production right now. There is no second-place candidate at the scale and compliance posture XRP occupies for this specific function. And the macro layer is shifting beneath all of it. Central banks are openly discussing neutral bridge assets for cross-border settlement. The IMF has acknowledged the need for digital liquidity layers. The Bank of Japan, the ECB, and the Federal Reserve are no longer asking if tokenized settlement happens. They are coordinating on how. When these catalysts converge, the wait-and-see money becomes the all-in money. And the wait-and-see money is measured in trillions. We are moving from an era of abundance to an era of scarcity, and most people watching this will not feel the shift until it is already complete. Exchange reserves for XRP are sitting at multi-year lows. Every week, tokens migrate from liquid trading venues into cold storage institutional custody. Once they cross that threshold, they are functionally removed from the tradable float. They do not come back. Multi-signature vaults do not chase 10% rallies. Here is what almost no one is willing to say out loud. The people calling XRP a scam right now are providing the exit liquidity for the people who understand what is being built. That is not insult. That is mechanism. Every infrastructure repricing in financial history has been funded by the confusion of the many and captured by the conviction of the few. Think about every previous cycle. The early electrical grid in the 1880s. Critics said gas lamps were good enough. The investors who funded the wires built generational wealth. The cellular network build-out in the 1980s. Critics said cell phones were a toy for executives. The infrastructure captured trillions in value. The early internet protocols. Critics said no ordinary person would ever need it. The repricing happened so fast that most of the public did not realize until the wealth had already been captured. The pattern is identical: quiet build, loud critics. Eventually indispensable. Massive value captured by the few who saw it early enough to position before the framework gap closed. The door is closing fast. Once the final regulatory switch flips and ETF flows compound, the retail entry window does not narrow gradually. It gaps. I know it is tough to watch the chart sit flat while you read another comment thread calling this asset a scam. I know the silence creates doubt. But as an analyst, I am trained to distinguish between noise and signal. The red candles are not the story. The flat consolidation is not the story. The accusations in comment sections are not the story. The story is what is being built while attention is pointed somewhere else. Being early feels exactly like being wrong, right up until the moment the math catches up. And the math always catches up. The critics of the electrical grid felt right for years. The critics of cellular networks felt right for years. The critics of the internet felt right for years, right up until the moment they were catastrophically, generationally wrong. The question is not whether the repricing arrives. The question is who is still holding when the price levels we are looking at today become the new floor. You are not behind. You are early. And early is the only seat in the room that ever matters. So the next time someone tells you XRP is a scam, you do not need to argue. You do not need to defend the asset. You can simply recognize what they are actually telling you. They are telling you they evaluate assets by looking at one variable. They are telling you they have never bothered to learn what XRP was engineered to do. They are telling you they confuse silence with absence. And they are telling you they do not understand how infrastructure repricing has worked in every cycle for the last 150 years. That is not your problem to solve. That is theirs to figure out before the window closes. Price is a distraction. Architecture is the reality. One is a candle. The other is a bridge. The question is, are you watching the noise or are you watching the structure? If you made it to the end of this breakdown, drop the word structure in the comments. I want to see who actually understands the difference between what is loud and what is load-bearing. And if you value this kind of deep dive analysis, subscribe so the next briefing finds you when the next catalyst lands. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. History does not reward comfort. It rewards those who pay attention when the room is quiet. I am the calm analyst. The math does not lie, and the system is almost complete. Stay patient. Stay rational. And as we always do, we do not wait for the future. We position for it.